Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Fisher. Senator Gillibrand, please.
Director Haines, the DoD and the IC are engaged in cyber operations against our adversaries every day and gain intelligence about how these adversaries operate and intend to operate in the cyber domain. However, in the event of a large-scale cyber attack on the homeland, CISA is in the leading role. How much of your intelligence on, for example, the PRC cyber threat are you able to share with CISA, and how much must remain inside the DoD and the IC?
We share almost everything with CISA, honestly. They get our analysis on these issues. They see the raw intelligence. We have overlap in terms of even intelligence that we get from commercial threat indexes and so on. So it's quite open sharing in that respect.
And when we rely on allies across the globe for operations and assistance, are we able to leverage our efforts with what we do with CISA with those allies?
Yeah, it's a great question. In fact, we have talked to allies about, for example, recognizing that so much of the critical cyber threat information exists in the commercial sector because we're trying to see how it is that adversaries are attacking them. We have talked to allies about working together in order to obtain and leverage each other's commercial threat information where that's permitted based on the agreements that we have with the commercial sector, and working with CISA to ensure that they have access to that information. That's an example of working with allies and partners in a way that can help CISA to better have, the landscape and the picture that they need for the work that they do.
And in the event of a substantial cyber attack by China on our domestic infrastructure, what would the chain of command look like in terms of defense and response?
I think it would depend on, this probably is not the best question for me, but I think it would depend on where the response is being conducted and how they're approaching it. Obviously, the president is the final authority in any event, but how it would work through the system, I suspect, might have some differences.
Lieutenant General Barrier, on the same question.
Nothing to add to that, ma'am.
Our government often talks about how our allies and partners are strategic advantage. From the perspective of China, Russia, and Iran, who are the allies and partners they are most concerned about building closer relationships with, and how would building closer relationships with those countries impact regional deterrence? And as context, I recently took a trip to the Middle East to study the impact of the Abraham Accords on UAE, on Morocco, Bahrain, and Israel. And with regard to that, obviously there was concern when Saudi Arabia decided to engage China in their negotiations with Iran. What is the impact of being able to bring Saudi Arabia into the Abraham Accords in the context of the larger question?
And Senator Gillibrand, forgive me, I missed the very first part of your question. Can you just repeat the first sentence?
Just that we often talk about how our allies and partners are our strategic advantage. And so from the perspective of China, Russia, Iran, who are they most concerned about? And then as an example, the Abraham Accords, I think, is a very strategic partnership for us that should be seen as very powerful. And how did the recent efforts by China to negotiate with Saudi Arabia and Iran affect that strategic alliance, and whether that was a powerful strategic alliance we should have been pushing for?
Yeah, so I think what our analysts would point to as a general matter would be a whole series of key countries that are sometimes referred to as hedging states that are in the space between, you indicated UAE as an example of this in a sense. There may be others. It's probably easier to talk about this in a closed session. But there are a variety of countries where, in effect, they're looking at the United States and China and Russia on the other side, in effect, and trying to diversify their relationship in a way that allows them to maximize their interests while at the same time pursue, sort of economic and other security strategies in each of these spaces. I would say with Saudi Arabia in particular, that and the Abraham Accords more generally, that we do think there's been kind of a value of bringing these countries together under certain circumstances, and that interaction has provided some security benefits to the United States and to others. But I think it's, each case would have to be looked at on a case-by-case basis in order to sort of identify what are some of the pros and cons. I'm not sure that was very helpful. Apologies.
Senator, I would say that your question is a bullseye on the discussion of strategic competition and what strategic competition is. We know that China and Russia are seeking partnerships with countries that have historically been U.S. partners, and this is the nature of the changing landscape and the complexity of the environment that I described in my opening statement. And we have to be there, and we have to be a better solution, whether that's through intelligence sharing or other partnerships. I don't think it's a lost cause. I think there's a lot we can do, and I think people see the goodness in what the United States brings, and we have to go forward with that.
Thank you, Senator Gillibrand. Senator Cotton, please.